Hello and welcome to ThisConnect Season 2. Welcome back. क्या हो गया?
No, I'm just waiting for you to finish.
Why are you giggling, man?
All right, my turn. Hello and welcome to ThisConnect Season 2, Episode 1. It's been a long time coming. Kartik and I, for the first time, have a list of what we'd like to talk about for half the season. I know we've made you wait a long time, but you should know that we've also been in the wait for a long time. For Season 2, we've changed a lot of stuff, some of which you can see. What are we doing today, Kartik?
Nothing left over from last season, right? That we needed to. Okay. We know that there was one topic that you all wanted us to discuss very much before we wrapped up last season, but we're going to start with that. Running in.
Or breaking in, if you prefer. It's the same term, it means the same thing.
It's almost going to be a little political in that sense, like how people take sides. It's like, this is the way to do it. This is my way of doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that it might not fit into
the
your
amount of
viewpoint.
logic required to figure out what break-in is much smaller than the amount of time and energy that the internet has spent discussing it.
Correct.
Okay, so let's start at the physics of breaking in, if you prefer. We'll do the myths and we'll do all of it, but let's start at what it is. To me, a brand new engine is a very exciting time. And then break-in is a extremely fraught time and people are worried and getting really concerned, right? What do you actually do when you're breaking in a car or a bike?
It's basically preparing the vehicle, right, for regular use. And in that sense, it's just for the parts to sink in, mesh together properly. That's about it. That's the simple explanation of it, right? It's the machine that's working together. So like the piston that's moving in the cylinder, everything just has to smoothen in and settle down, which was very important once upon a time. And today, as manufacturing has gotten so much better, it's a lot easier.
That's it. You don't have to worry. That's the end of this episode, more or less. Okay. Let me go slightly more into detail. Your average car, and to a smaller extent, your average motorcycle or a scooter, is an extremely complicated mechanical system. And that means there's lots of places where metal could touch metal. Metal's not supposed to touch metal. That's what the lubrication is for. So if you were to take motor oil, engine oil of any sort, and put it between your fingers and press, it'll always feel slippery because you simply cannot generate enough force with your fingers to break the film of oil. And the job of that oil is to never let metal touch metal. So technically, when they say pistons and cylinders have to meet each other and settle down into a pattern, there's still no real metal to metal contact that's supposed to happen. But what we're trying to get the surfaces to do is blend against each other, because no matter how well you manufacture these surfaces, there will be small irregularities. The biggest one that everybody talks about is the piston ring to the contact with the bore ball. There are other systems that need to settle in as well. Just above this are the camshafts, which right? Suspension units. The dampers have never been used before. The springs have never flexed before. All of that has to happen. Your brake pads are brand new. They have to settle against the rotors. That process has to happen. And so on and so forth. So every part of your vehicle is brand new. Things that move haven't moved before. And many things have to move against each other for the first time. That's the process of breaking in. And the most critical one of this is the least complicated one of this, which is the piston ring and the bore.
Yeah.
Why was it so important back in the day, and what has changed?
That's a good question. I realized that I am so out of touch with the reality of today in that way. Today's manuals, you remember cars used to come with that sticker for the first 1,000. It used to be on the windscreen all the time. That first 1,000 kilometers, do not drive above this RPM and that RPM and at this speed and this gear.
Some bikes I think still do.
Oh yeah? So when we were doing prep for this episode, we actually spoke to a whole bunch of people to get expert takes on this, right? So one of the people we spoke to was the head of engineering at Maruti Suzuki, Mr. C.V. Raman. And he was a little perplexed. He was like, I don't think we do that anymore. And I was like, really? He's like, no. It's like, it's been a long time since I looked at the manuals. Actually, I've never looked at the manual section to see what running in was.
No, worse. I don't think the manufacturers have looked at their manuals in a long time either.
Yeah.
Yeah, because look, the whole process of running in has changed.
Yeah.
What the manufacturers and engineers have told you say that their own manuals don't have accurate information, because the process is as complicated and written down as it was in the 70s and the 80s. But the technology today doesn't even resemble any of that.
Right.
So it's either the legal guys doing it, it's either the warranty claim guys doing it, or the guys who update the manual simply never look at the run-in section and update the information.
So it was great because when speaking to him, we had a couple of calls and we went back and forth on this. So he finally sent me screenshots of the manual, like images of the manual, and in which where it says for the first 960 kilometers, 960 not 1000, interestingly, for one of the manuals, it basically said, "Don't be an ass."
Yeah.
I mean, just to paraphrase that, it was like, don't.
Also, wait, after running in, you can be. Is it?
Yeah, then go ahead, be yourself. So like when it starts up and the engine is cold, don't rev it. I mean, don't accelerate hard. Don't abuse it. Like in the first 1000 kilometers, don't tow anything. Stuff like that. Very basic stuff. And one of the things he said was, from then to now, basically the cylinder honing technology has improved so much.
Correct.
That you don't really have to worry about run-ins anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So the entire premise of running and being extra careful is
just be careful, like the whole time.
Forever and ever.
Yeah.
And there are people who are like that, and that's not a good idea.
Yeah, so what I understood is that you can't baby the vehicle, which means just be super gentle with it. Like don't even remove the plastics off the seats, kind of gentle with the engine. Don't do it.
Oh my God. Those are scars from early days.
Yeah. And the other side of it is, you shouldn't be like, I have bought a new vehicle and I'm going to experience the entirety of its performance tonight. That is also not a great idea.
Before you continue, I missed that point, and that's a great point. Do not baby the vehicle. One of the things that the instructions do say is, do not run it at the same speed for extended durations, which is what people do very often.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, I've got to 2000 RPM, shift up. I don't want to take it above that. They're being extra careful, but that's not good either.
No,
Anyway.
so what he was talking about, the honing thing, is actually an important thing. Your cylinders are now finished. The surface is finished so that it can bed with the rings as fast as possible. The thing about it, and why I hate what the manuals are doing to you right now, is from whatever I have spoken to people, whatever I have seen on the internet, whatever I have read about it in engineering papers and stuff, this honing and this bedding in process is not lasting more than like 200 kilometers anymore, okay? So at the end of those 200 kilometers, whatever bedding in was to happen has happened. What are you doing for the next 1100, 1200, 1400 kilometers of your running process per the manual? Honestly, I do not know. And by that point, if you've screwed up your engine, it's screwed. And by that point, if you've got the world's greatest engine making as much compression and power as possible, that's the engine you get. The problem is, getting an engine to screw itself up in those kilometers is nearly impossible today because the tech has moved so far forward. And the difference between a well-settled engine and a poorly settled engine today, it's not as large as it used to be because metallurgy has changed. How we manufacture those engines have changed. The technology that goes into assembling the engine has changed. The clean rooms that a manufacturer uses, they have changed. There's just very, very few ways left to mess it up. And that's what the warranty is for, because if it's going to go bang, it's going to go bang in a big way. It's not going to show up just outside your warranty and say, now you're screwed. It doesn't happen anymore.
I have a hilarious story about this. One of my friends back in college, he had just got and he was very, very particular about his bikes. And he had got an RX something, I don't remember. This is the RXZ era, right? And for some reason, he was unhappy with that bike, right? And he wanted it changed, right? And the showroom or service center, whatever, was unwilling to accept his reason for being unhappy with the bike. So he said, fine. So he basically went out to destroy the engine, right? So he was riding it in first gear, doing everything just in first gear. And even then, it took him such a long time to get that engine to basically malfunction, right? That he was tired by the end of it. It's like, this thing won't break.
I think
even back then they were that good, right?
Yeah. And the rumor is that this friend is still trying to break that engine, and it'll break the day Yamaha launches the XSR 155 in India, and therefore never.
So yeah.
No, and on the other side, you have to remember that anecdotally, as road testers, Kartik and I receive brand new vehicles all the time. And that means all of the systems we spoke about in the beginning, suspensions, they are brand new, brakes, they are brand new, engines, they are brand new. And we don't have the luxury of trying to run in properly, break them in gently, have a first service, and then do our tests and analysis and observations, right? In the magazines that do a lot of instrumented testing, they are testing 0 to 100 braking times, etc. on literally very, very close to brand new vehicles. We've never seen a vehicle breakdown. And the vehicles that break down come from brands where we are expecting their quality levels to be poor and vehicles will break down. It's never an unexpected thing that happens. So if you get let's take Yamaha or Suzuki, which are good quality vehicles, you're never expecting a problem with it. And I promise you, if this vehicle was tested thoroughly by 800 magazines and then it was serviced reasonably well and kept together, you buy this from the manufacturer a year later, I promise you that vehicle is basically going to run well. I have never faced this issue. Okay. You want to bust some myths now?
I want to just talk about one of the basics.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about parts and honing and everything coming together, the simplest idea in all of this is tolerances. And I think that is the biggest difference today. Why machines are so much more reliable. Because tolerances are in micromillimeters, right? When we're talking about engines, when parts that are moving at, imagine a piston going up and down in a cylinder in a minute. That's insane speed. But if the accuracy of that piston ring, that gap between the ring and the wall and then to the piston is consistent every time because the ring is perfectly made.
Correct.
The piston is the right size. And this is literally in micromillimeters, right? If it's right, it works. You don't need to do much. Earlier, the bedding in and all was, so in case if it's a little bit off, it'll scrape a little bit off, and which is why then you drain the oil to remove all that residue so it doesn't get stuck somewhere else and stuff like that. Right? So it's just that one simple idea, being able to manufacture things more precisely, that has solved so much of this.
Think about it like this. The level of tolerances and quality that some of the highest level engine tuners on earth were able to produce, let's say 10 years ago, that's in mass manufacturing today. Which is why if you think about it, in the 70s, 80s, 90s and 2000s, there was this idea of blueprinting an engine. Which is to take a performance engine, usually an inline four from a Japanese sports bike, and you'd take it apart, you'd measure all of the parts individually, and then you'd shave weight here, shave weight there, and balance each thing so that you'd get the perfect engine.
Okay.
In the last 24 years, I have never heard of a modern engine being blueprinted.
Okay.
Right? Because as time passes and you become more accurate in mass manufacturing, the difference in performance that you gain, the difference in reliability that you gain from this kind of precision work, it's diminishing returns. And at some point, you're like, this is a waste of time. There's no need. Right? So if you take, I don't know, the M1000RR and the S1000RR, which is the stock production bike and the hand-built high-end production bike. If you had the skills to extract full performance from both machines, you still might see a difference in performance. But for the average rider, you can't even reach max performance on the S1000RR. Where's the question of you exploiting the M1000RR beyond your social media, where you put nice pictures? Correct? Sure. What difference will it make how you run in these machines? What you need to remember here is the higher performance the machine is, the more careful you have to be with run-in for only one thing. If you take a high performance machine and do too much with it too early, you can generate ridiculously high pressures inside the combustion chamber and therefore hinder the process of run-in a little bit. But that's caveats for really high performance engines.
Oh, really? I didn't know this.
Yeah, because when you're trying to seat the engine rings, what you're trying to do is generate enough pressure to have the seating process go smoothly, right? For which you need intermediate pressures. If you don't generate enough pressure, they won't seat properly. And literally you have the first 200, 250 kilometers while the honing is still there, after which it is scraped.
So you're just saying don't go to the higher,
don't be stupid about it. Right?
Okay.
So when you're starting out, you want to generate substantial pressure, but not extreme pressure, which means you can't baby the vehicle. Which means you drive more or less as close to normal as possible. And the easiest way to vary your speeds, which is another thing that they'll keep telling you, is to drive in traffic. As much as you hate traffic and as much as you hate the idea that, oh, I bought this brand new vehicle, car, bike, whatever. And now what do you expect me to do? I want to go down like the highway and do a trip. But no, for the first 200 kilometers, what you should be doing is going through traffic where you don't have the chance to let the vehicle settle down at a speed, where you're constantly making gear changes, you're using the brakes lightly, you are accelerating and you are slowing down, which is exactly what the run-in process is.
I got you.
What?
Let's get to it.
Yeah. And right after that, the other thing that I like to do, and a lot of engineers say this is a good idea, is to change oil about halfway before the first service itself. And at that point, you change the oil and you change the oil filter. Remember, the insight of this is very simple. When you're removing the honing from the cylinder wall, as the ring is settling in, some amount of debris is generated. They'll be at the top of the engine where the cams are settling in. It will be in the combustion chamber where the piston rings, etc. There might be initial small contact between your bearings at the bottom of the crank and how the crank is sitting on. You want all of this debris removed, and to me, halfway between new and first service is the right time to do it. Don't worry about the expense. This is also not the time to spend on expensive synthetic oils. Because remember, in another 300, 500 kilometers, this oil is going to get flushed out of the engine too. So I don't care what oil you use, just use the same grade as what the manufacturer recommends. I honestly don't pay enough attention to this. So whatever oil comes and whatever they put in is good enough for me at the service center. I don't break my head over this. If it's synthetic, semi-synthetic, mineral, honestly, I don't care. Do you have a thing?
I was just going to say, will you stop the teasing and tell them how you do it?
Yeah, sure. So I've done all the versions of it. Okay, when I had my first RD350, which was a sensitive engine, very loose tolerances, very low levels of metallurgy compared to what we see today, I had to go through the process of babying it. And when I didn't baby it, I also seized that engine 2-3 times until we discovered it wasn't my actual fault. The one of the con rods in the cylinder was just
bent.
off, and every single time it would knock a piston into the wall and eventually cause some sort of failure.
Yeah.
So I had to baby that engine. My KB125, I don't remember being so cautious, but remember we're already talking a 20-year shift from technology into the, I'm going to say, late 90s. So I already didn't baby it as much as the RD350, which again, remember the RD350's context was parts were difficult to get. It was an old twin-cylinder engine from the 70s, etc., etc. It was out of production by then. Everything that you bought was expensive and hard to find. Like each piston that we destroyed was a thing, right? When I got to, let's say, my Duke 200, I don't remember sparing it even in the beginning. The 390, I know I caned it for the first 50 kilometers. Like everything that I just told you about, not generating excessive cylinder pressures, I did all of those things. Is my 390 suffering because of it today? Honestly, no. It's at nearly 40,000 kilometers. It runs well. I don't see a loss of performance. So I can't see a long-term effect of not having babied that. Then I got the Multistrada 1200, which you can't really exploit full performance unless you go to racetrack very early. So I didn't. Did I notice a difference in the engine? No. My V4, I didn't run it in at all. Somebody ran it for 700 kilometers and gave it to me. And whatever they did with running. And this person is a Parsi doctor. He's super cautious with his machine. So I'm assuming it got a great run in.
Right.
I can't tell the difference between my 1200, which was not run in so carefully, and the V4, which was run in super carefully. So as far as I'm concerned, if you're not stupid, as Kartik said at the beginning, if you're not going to be an ass about it, I think basically you'll do fine. What's your idea of running? How do you run in your vehicles?
So yeah, I think maybe this is just, one of those rituals. So you enjoy the process and you feel like you've done something to have created a bond with the machine. Maybe it's just that now that we've discussed that machines today are so reliable and so well made. But there is a process that I followed earlier. So even back in college when I had the CBZ, and it just so happened at that point that I got a CBZ, and soon after another friend, very close, like maybe a couple of weeks or at the most a month or so, another friend, he got a CBZ. And we both had the same black and gold and all of that. So you just, say, hey, CBZ, right? You have a CBZ, I have a CBZ, the same bike. But then one day I said, Chal, I'll ride your bike, right? I said, yeah, sure. And I rode his bike and I realized, man, that feels very different, right? And so I just asked him, how did you run in? And he said, no, just what the manual said. I said, okay. So I said, what did you do? He said, I don't know, I did something different. I said, what did you do? So this was, I don't know how I arrived at it, to be honest, but basically whatever the manual said was the RPM, right?
Yep.
So I stuck to that RPM. But what I would do was I would run through the gears, right? So not initially. So at the first stage, even in sixth gear, let's say fifth gear, whatever it was.
Fifth.
CBZ was 5, right? 5. Yeah, 5 gears. So CBZ was 5 gears. So whatever it was, you would stick to that. You would not push it or anything like that. Just stick to that, ride it easy, clean. So that would be the first 100 kilometers. After the first 100 kilometers, I would change tactics a bit, right? I would start going down the gears. So like, let's say I would go from 5th to 4th, right? So just let it go up the revs from the suggested max revs, just a little bit higher, and then immediately go back. So what I started doing was, what I ended up using a lot of was negative torque. So instead of using compression pressure,
compression braking instead,
to increase the load, I used negative torque to actually put the load on the system.
Correct.
So that's how that was just the simple thing that I did, right? So it would go from 6th to 5th. Then as you go to 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers, it would be 6th, 5th, 4th, right? And then I would start interspersing that with actually throttle use. So I would take it to, like, let's say if the max RPM recommended was 5,000 RPM, let's say, right? I would take it in second gear to 5,000, quick, right? So quick burst, but quickly up the gears again. So you're giving it very short bursts of load, right? So going from negative load to positive load, just short bursts. So it's, again, this is just like a ritual now. You think about it, right? You did it back then.
Yeah, and you don't need to do any of this anymore. Like, don't do any of this.
I still did it with my Busa when I got it, right?
And you still don't need to do it anymore.
And I think it feels very good because of that.
Yeah. So look, your involvement in the process, which what Karthik described, I think beautifully, is there is a lot of possible involvement in the process. And you can go as deep into this rabbit hole as you like. There is absolutely no reason why you should not. But will it actually make a difference to the reliability that you're going to see, to the performance that you're going to see, how long this engine will last?
I
Not
like to
really.
believe it makes a difference to the smoothness and the character of the motorcycle, giving it a certain personality which will be unique to your motorcycle.
And it will give you more things to worry about, because if you can't worry about your vehicle, are you really involved with your vehicle, right? Because my experience is, have I paid this level of attention to all the various, I've owned 10 machines so far. Yeah, 10 machines so far, mine. And in terms of test vehicles, we've both gone through collectively 3,000, 4,000 things, cars and bikes both, something like that, right? I have never paid this kind of serious attention to running in ever. Have I had serious mechanical breakdowns on any of the machines? Out of the test vehicles, maybe 3 or 4 over this entire period. And my personal machines, never. Right? So empirically, my data, and it's a large data set if you think about it, says whether you do this carefully, you do this badly, you be an ass to your vehicle from day one,
What
or
happened
not.
to your Duke 200? Sorry, just
My Duke 200's failures came from manufacturing, not from the run-in process. By the end of it, it was so bad that the chassis had scratches which disappeared by the end in one service. They had to replace the chassis itself. Okay, so that bike was an exception because it was really bad. Like, nothing worked on that bike, and I don't think run-in would have changed that. But that's the only exception. And even then, I think it never left me stranded. So I think basically I'm okay because I got all my rides in. But I can't connect it to the run-in process at all.
I had 2 390 Dukes, nothing happened. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. And just
Yeah. I had one, it's still here. Where is your 390 Duke, if I ask?
other happy riders enjoying it.
Oh, sharing is caring, is it? How much money did you charge for this caring and sharing?
Whatever they wanted.
You gave it to a friend or what?
Yeah, both went to people.
Because my RDs went like that to my friends.
Went to people who wanted the bikes.
Yeah,
so.
can't negotiate that. I hate it when friends want to buy a bike.
Yeah. It's just like, come take it, whatever you want.
Yeah, so in the 390 Duke's case, which I should have known better given my experience with the 200 Duke, they gave it to me on a temporary plate at 7 in the morning, so before traffic. I rode it straight to Joshua's garage with as much acceleration as I could bring to bear on it. So what Karthik said, downshift the gears, let the engine's compression braking help the rings a little bit with load it up with acceleration. And I don't remember really watching the RPM caps at all. So in that sense, would I do it today knowing a little bit more about running in from this prep in the episode? Perhaps a little bit more cautious, but honestly, it's not going to make much of a difference. And then straight to the garage. And I told Josh, you have 2 jobs. One is I want the wheels to be painted white. You can start on it now because registration is going to take a week or whatever. And the other thing is, please change the oil and the oil filter. Right. And he said, which oil? And I said, I honestly do not care because in another 300 kilometers, this oil will be gone too.
Right.
So for the 1200, I think I did the same thing. I took delivery in the evening. I rode it home, rode it to Pune the next day, came back, got an oil change. So that was 320 kilometers if I'm not mistaken. So the guys at the dealership are like freaking out. They're saying, sir, it is not 50 kilometers, 750 kilometers, 1000 kilometers it will change. I said, listen, I'm going to pay for the oil and the oil filter anyway, right? They said, yes. I said, so just do it now. So they changed the oil filter.
Fair.
Then I think I went back to Pune the next day, came back the next day. I'd finished my run-in. So I said, now first service. And they're like, sir, it doesn't work like this. You have to come at 1000 kilometers. I said, yeah, well, we are close enough. It's 800, I think, at that point of time. So I said, we are close enough. But sir, only yesterday we changed your oil. I said, yes, but we are 400 kilometers later down the road or whatever.
Right.
Change my oil and oil filter. And it took them a while to understand that this is the process. But I basically finished my run in that 2-day period. And the road to Pune was nice because it's not a straight road where you can sit at one speed for a long time. It is a reasonably twisty road. So with a little bit of care and caution, you achieve the result you want, which is don't sit at the same speed for a long time. And sometimes I'll just do that by changing gears for the sake of it, right? If I have to maintain a steady 100, what it doesn't want me to do is sit at a steady 5500 RPM. So fine, I'll go down to 4th for a bit, go down to 3rd for a bit, come back up into 6th for a bit, and keep the load on the engine moving around so that the engine gets the full selection of loads that it will experience in its lifetime. For a race bike, you can run it in really hard at the racetrack, but the idea is a race bike will only see the top end of the load, which is why you want the engine to settle in one place and you should be fine. You won't do it to a street bike or a normal car.
I actually spoke to Rayoman Banerjee, who's a 8-time national champ car racing. And he's also been involved with Volkswagen's Motorsport Indian, like the Polo Cup and all, about this. Because he's, of course, spent a lot of time with the FISMEs and everything, the roll-ons and all of that. So what do you do? It's like, man, how much time you spend running in the vehicles on the tracks, just driving around, just trying to put in some kilometers because they've come brand new. I said, so what do? It's like, actually, we just try and do step ups, gentle step ups for initial maybe 200 kilometers or so, 100 kilometers or something like that. And then we start pushing it harder. Then we start building the pace. But that's basically it. His words were also, it came down to, effectively was, don't be an ass. Like when the engine's cold, don't push it. Exactly. Don't abuse the engine. Just take care of that much after you've done that basic little bit at the start.
Okay.
I actually, just one small thing, I don't know, like for me, I feel even today, like for the smaller displacement, mass market vehicles, I would not be as callous, right? I would say, be kinder. Don't play it too safe either, right? So in this whole thing of varying speeds and all, do all of that. Don't be too easy on the bike, but don't be an ass either.
So there are multiple systems in a vehicle that we have to settle in as we start driving a brand new vehicle. So let's do system by system. So we set clear agendas for people saying this is what needs to be taken cautiously and just like don't even care about this. It doesn't matter, right? So let's start with brakes. How do you bed in brakes? And I'm starting at brakes because you will be replacing brake pads at some point. The same idea will apply every time you change either the rotor or the pad or both. How do you bed in your brakes?
I think with brakes and tires for me, it's a light initial. Go easy. I don't know if it's really to do with bedding it in as much as getting a feel for what they're doing.
It's both, I think, yeah.
Right? It will be, sometimes I've had issues with brake pads. So I've had to replace them because the feel has not been good, which has been inconsistent at times, right? So you know that when you've ridden enough motorcycles that this is not feeling fine, right? So it's just that getting used to the motorcycle, knowing what you need to do when, and therefore, in a way, the motorcycle also learns from you as a rider, right? So for brakes and for tires, I think it's the same idea for me, that you take it easy. If you're going for a ride to, Lavasa or something like that, you don't go full attack the first time you go there.
If you go to Lavasa, don't go full attack at all.
Whatever you want to do, right? Have fun, be safe. So you just take steps, like you take time to get to know what the vehicle is doing so that you are in sync, right? So whatever the machine is what you have to work with, right? So getting a feel for what the machine is doing. And tires, when they're new, brakes, when they're new, they may have some coating on them, which needs to be worn off, and it takes some time. So you have to give it that time to scrub it. So, let's say you're leaning and you still have that little bit of that coating on it, there's that tire hair on it. All of that needs to be scrubbed off before it really starts working cleanly and you get a nice, good feel. So you have to give it that time, and just doing it step by step is what helps you out. I think that's what works.
So I would say, think about it as two things happening simultaneously. The getting used to the vehicle is a very critical part of the run-in process, and it has nothing to do with the mechanics of the vehicle as much as your sense of how this thing works. Because the idea is you've gone from something that you're used to a machine that you're not used to, which means its weight balance could be different from what you're expecting. How it handles, how it responds to your steering inputs could be different. How it responds to you on the brakes could be different. Obviously, the performance will be different, etc., etc. So one, because you're driving with some amount of load but not too fast and not too slow, you're getting a sense of how this vehicle handles around you, how it responds to what you think it should be doing. And getting that sense of expectation settled in is a part of the run-in process, which is not a mechanical process, but it is a very important part of the process. The brakes thing, what I want to say is, I like to ride them normally, but I will pull the brakes hard once here and there. I will load the brakes up fully. I don't want to overheat the pads and glaze them over, but I do want them to establish the load, because I find in my experience, I don't know that there is science backing this up, when I don't do this, I get less bite out of the brake pad when it finishes. And when I do this, I get more bite. So it's not like a constant hard brake again and again, but during the first 50, 60 kilometers, there will be some hard braking involved just to settle them in. But you have to be cautious that you don't overheat the pad. So it's not one after the other, one after the other. You do it once and then you let it be. And then a couple of kilometers later, if there's nobody around you, it's safe, you do it again. But to me, 50 kilometers in, you should know what your brakes are doing by that point of time. You shouldn't have to worry about it too much. With the tires, first 5, 6 kilometers, I don't try anything at all. And the only time I'll weave a motorcycle is when I'm trying to clean up the tread. It has nothing to do with trying to heat your tires. Please don't do it. The MotoGP guys do it, but their tires are already hot because they've come out of tire warmers and they're heading out on track where they'll be even hotter. They're also doing it to clean up the tires. The only way you can heat a tire is by hard braking and hard acceleration. And in our ambient temperatures, you just do not need to do it.
So like when I got the second gen Duke, right? For instance, when I first got it, it felt a bit strange to ride. Everything seemed okay. It was the strangest little miss on the bike, which I actually didn't notice. Another friend of mine noticed. And it was that the forks were sitting unevenly in the T.
Right.
So there was one side that was pushed up further, which is why the bike was just kind of pushing you on one side, right? It didn't feel natural. So there are those kind of things that also get in the way, can happen, right? Which is a small little fix. You just have to open up the T and slide them back down and it's done. You just have to sync it. But it hadn't been done, and that can change the feel for the bike. So it's good to take your time and get to know the motorcycle or the vehicle, and
that's true.
Just figure out what's working, what's not.
Correct. So that's that part, right? Is there anything that you need to do with the steering mechanism of a car or the handlebar setup of a motorcycle? Is there a is there a component that is part of the run-in process?
I think all of this, cars are even simpler, right? In this regard. Because everything is doubled up. So it's not that you have to worry about these systems all that much. There are more parts, but they are also
much stronger, much more robust.
More robust. They're more sheltered. There's more protection for everything. So I don't really
think about it. The gearbox on your car, at least the gear lever is air conditioned most of the time. Just can't say that for a motorcycle.
Yeah. So cars, aside from the engine aspect of it, I'm really not thinking much about the car. I will, if it's a manual, I will be particular about using the clutch properly, because a lot of people, and I'm sorry, but use the clutch fully. It's like people just do this and,
But extending a leg takes energy, Kartik.
You mess up the clutch, you mess up the gearbox.
In 2024, the energy you saved by not extending a leg fully, you could use for so much on Instagram.
And people complain then about the shifts not being good and the car not feeling good. Okay. So with manuals, at least
I love how frustrated you are with this.
At least with manuals, try and figure out where the clutch is actually disengaging completely so that you get smooth shifts, right?
What is the clutch disengaging completely, Kartik?
Just to make sure you're taking care of your vehicle, try and figure out when your engine's drive force is not being transmitted into the gearbox. That is the clutch being
don't make it more complicated. Make it simpler. Come on. Basically, push the lever, the clutch pedal all the way until it hits the firewall. Then you can't make a mistake.
Okay, fine. That's the easy way of doing it. So, it's not always you don't have to go all the way in. But anyways.
It's the safest way to do it.
It's the safest.
If you pay attention, you don't need to go all the way. There is a very clear point you can tell where you've crossed the friction zone and now the clutch is fully disengaged, beyond which if you press it is just leg exercises. It's not required. But if you're absolutely at any point confused, taking the lever all the way to the firewall is the safest way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Can you rest your foot on top of the clutch lever while you're driving? Is that a good idea?
It's an excellent idea. Who needs clutch plates to last 40, 50,000 kilometers? Right?
And what about manufacturers who don't give dead pedals exclusive to the purpose of resting your leg?
I'm sorry, I can't complain about those things too much. It's not really that. As much as I would like to, you need dead pedals on every car. Okay, you live with it. If it's not there, if it's a great car, I'll make peace with it easily. Yeah.
So the basics need to be in the good place. And that means driving skills also, not just engineering and technology.
Which is why I think people like automatics, right? It takes that responsibility off as well. You don't really need to learn how to change gears. The system does it. And if the system doesn't work well, it's the system's fault.
Is this where we're heading as a civilization, you think?
I think for pretty much everything, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else do it.
Soon, actually, I don't know why we're discussing this at all. Soon there'll be autonomous cars. They'll do the run-in by themselves. They won't need us at all, right? At which point they'll ban motorcycles.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, motorcycles will get banned for sure.
I will fight for them. Don't worry.
See, you remember recently there was a very tragic incident where I think there was a Tesla with full self-drive or autonomy mode engaged, and he was on the phone and it hit a motorcyclist and the motorcycle expired. This is the second time I think a Tesla's hit a motorcycle. And think about it like this. Today that Tesla is in the minority. So you can afford to let the motorcycle be out there because the the full self-driving cars are a minority. What do you think they will go after when the majority is full self-drive and the motorcycle is the minority? What will be easier to solve?
They'll solve autonomous two-wheelers also.
What's the point of an autonomous two-wheeler?
It's cheaper.
You won't need to own it. It's autonomous.
Fine.
A vehicle will just show up when you need it.
Yeah, so the two-wheeler will be there when you need it. No?
Do you think there'll be two-wheelers in the autonomous future? I think there won't be.
We fight for them.
Leave us a comment and tell
fight
us.
for them.
No, you can fight for whatever you want, but do you think it's going to happen as a society? We fight for a lot of stuff, right?
Very sad.
We fight for the idea that there should be no sponsorship and there should be no promotion, there should be no advertorials, and this is who MotorInc is. But you go subscription and see what happens, right? I'm saying the ideal is great. The idea is great. Fighting for what you believe in is awesome. But I'm saying just from a trend perspective, if you were to do autonomous vehicles tomorrow as a majority on the road, do you think they'll allow two-wheelers to be there?
Taking that analogy to this autonomous angle, if there were no motorcycles in the future, I think there'd be a lot of unhappy people as well.
Yeah. But unhappy people have existed throughout civilization. They are usually the guys who cause changes to happen.
So we have to fight for happiness. That's what I'm saying.
We're always fighting for happiness. If you're happy, why would you fight for it?
For more happiness then, if that's what it has to be.
Being very clear about this. Unhappy people cause change. It's true. If you weren't, if for example humans were happy to be cold and wet and all of this, and would they invent clothes or fire? They wouldn't need to, right? If we were happy to take, 65 years to get around the earth, we wouldn't need a more complicated transportation system, and then running in wouldn't be an issue at all. There'd be a bullock cart and it'd be done.
I did not understand that. I'm sorry. I did not understand that.
I'm saying if you're happy with where you are.
No, 65 years around the earth bit.
If you wanted to go around the earth and you didn't have a modern transportation system that can do it in a matter of hours, if this was not even a thing, then you'd be effectively how migration used to work back in the day, where over generations we slowly went to different parts of the earth and settled down and became the human civilization as a diffuse thing. 65 years around the earth with a bullock cart.
Okay. Fine.
There was a need for it. There were people unhappy about it. That is why we did those things.
Okay.
Now back to running in.
I was just going to say, yeah, fine, and let's get back to it.
Okay, to the plastics exteriors of the car, is there any part of the running process that has to? I'm just checking because I don't know where we are at. So if there's somebody who's doing their first ever vehicle, is there something on that they need to do while their car is brand new? No. Clearly from your expression, it says, yeah, don't even worry about that. I would say just do one thing, which is before you sign the papers for your vehicle, give it 1, 2, 3 walk-arounds if needed and make sure there are no scratches, dents on it before you take delivery. Because if you do sign the papers and you find damage to it later, the dealer can easily turn around and say, you caused the damage. The only way to prevent it is make sure, take pictures of the car when you do take it. And usually, if you do have that kind of documentary evidence, then the dealer will say, we'll fix it for you gratis, whether it means replacing the part or repainting the part. It's not a problem.
So those of you who are new to ThisConnect, in season 1, we did an entire episode about taking delivery of your car and bike. And there we've spoken about what you need to do on that day or just prior to that or at that time in depth. So you can check that out.
Finally, the engine.
Oh, back.
This is a summary bullet points. Okay. Number 1, don't baby the engine, which is don't be too gentle with it, but don't be extreme with it either. You want to stay in the middle of the driving range, and that means basically driving how you'd normally drive. So if your RPM range is, say it's a car from 1 to 6,000 RPM, if you want a number, stay between say 2,000 and 4,000. Okay, 1. to try and avoid driving at the same speed for long durations. And that means RPM, not the actual vehicle speed. Which means if you want to maintain 60 down the highway for 5 hours, make 60 million gear changes. Which is change the gears so that the transmission gets to do a job and the revs on the engine vary, and therefore the load on the engine varies a bit. So ideally, don't go for a long trip on straight roads right after you purchase your vehicle. Ideally, spend the first 400, 500 kilometers in traffic where you do have the opportunity to speed up, slow down, make a lot of gear changes, use the brakes lightly, etc.
So when he went to Pune and back on his Ducati, that's awesome because he simulated city traffic by doing the gear changes himself. And that's awesome because you control when it happens, at what speed, and how you want to go about it.
Correct.
So yes, what you're doing is driving on the highway, but you're simulating those kind of conditions. And I think that is a great way of solving it because you'll be doing it much quicker as well.
Correct. And if you're thinking that the run-in process will be tiresome, one way to do it is to compress it. Just remember, there's more heat in the system when it's brand new because the lubrication system has to work harder to keep up with the fact that so many new metal parts are in there trying to learn how to work with each other. So take more breaks than you normally might. Okay? Like I've figured out where 500, 600, 700 kilometer riding day doesn't bother me at all, and I only stop for fuel. But I wouldn't do that if I was running in the vehicle. I would stop every hour, hour and a half and allow the vehicle to cool a bit. I'm not sure I want to let it get cold again because that's thermal shock. You're basically heating it to operating temperature, letting it to zero, and then allowing it to come up to temperature again. Maybe I don't want to do that, but you do want to give it half an hour so the cooling system has a slightly larger opportunity to recover before you put the load back in the system. Next, I would always make a
thermal shock. Small displacement air-cooled engines, when they're hot, do not throw hot water. Do not throw water on them to cool them.
Who does that?
Garam ho gaya. Do not do that. Do not do that. Do not do that.
Yeah. I've heard of this. People doing this to brake rotors when they're smoking and stuff also. Don't do it. You'll warp the disc.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the smoke is normal. The smoke is just stuff on the brake pad burning off, debris burning off and stuff. It's not fire yet. Okay? Don't throw water at hot things. You will bend those things because you've just shocked the system. Next, I would always do an oil change halfway between your normal first service interval. So if it says 750 in your manual, about 350 kilometers in, I'd want the oil changed. If it says 1000 in your manual, about 500, I want the oil changed. This is not the time to spend on an expensive oil. Any reasonably good oil will do. Whatever the manufacturer uses is usually good enough for this process because in another 350 or 500 kilometers, whatever, you'll be switching out oil again. Never skimp on the oil filter in the middle of this process.
Completely in the interest of clarity and simplicity, I haven't done that. And since we said that this is almost a religious / getting to know your bike process.
The logic that I use for this is, as your engine wears in, small amounts of metal shavings accumulate in the engine. It allows the oil filter to do the job of keeping those shavings from circulating all around the engine. I prefer to swap that oil filter out 2 times instead. I don't think either of us have noticed a massive advantage from it, but just like him doing all of his various calculated revs gives him some satisfaction, changing the oil early gives me some satisfaction. This is a purely emotional purchase. Are you happy now?
I'm telling you. Because the more I think about it, it's that. It's like it's just you saying, I did something for my machine.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
Yeah. I generally, beyond this, the only other thing, Kartik has a good idea, which I think we should mention, is when you're trying to vary the revs, using compression braking, what you would call engine braking, is a good idea. Don't overuse it. Don't let it redline because you used it so aggressively, but allowing that compression load to seat your rings is a good idea. You will use your brakes to stop. Do not try to use engine braking alone as your only thing. You're just using it to create a load. It's not actually a retardation device. Correct? And similarly, remember, other systems in your vehicle are also being bedded in the same process. So it's not just the engine that is turning over for the first time. So are the suspension units, so are the brakes, and so are so many other systems. So give it time. We've heard of stories about new vehicles and you'll get a burning smell from the vehicle. That is also completely normal. It's all the plastics heating up for the first time. It's all the workers' hands all over the engine, leaving oil stains behind, whatever spillages have happened along the way, waxes that are in places that they shouldn't be. All of this burning off will cause smells. This is completely normal.
Is there a distinctive smell that you remember?
I remember that before the evap canisters came to all the vehicles, during running in, I'd smell a lot more petrol. And post first service, the vehicle would smell a lot less petrol-y. But now they just smell like hot plastic. And then post running in, that hot plastic smell sort of goes away, and then they sort of smell normal. What did you notice?
There's a smell that I only associate with Bajaj.
Oh,
Right? Yeah.
okay.
Because all the exhausts used to be, I mean, a lot of the bikes, the Pulsars, I guess, used to have the exhaust also finished in black. Right? So when they got hot and they were new, there's that one smell that would be distinctive, that would be of Pulsars, I'm going to say now, right?
I know what comments you're going to get on this.
Why?
It's the melting shoe smell from New Royal Enfields while they learn that the exhaust root is about to get on their shoe.
But you don't remember this? Like,
No, I
in
don't.
my head, it's the black paint of the exhaust
Okay.
and a new bike, right?
Nice.
And that's something that I remember. It may have happened with other vehicles as well, but Bajaj was one of the first few to go with that all black, blacked out treatment and all. So I kind of stuck in my head.
I didn't know Pulsars had a new bike smell.
Yeah, but yeah, that is something I remember.
Yeah.
If any of you do, please support. Okay, support kijiye. One of the things, I remember another friend used to have Figo, and I remember having this conversation with him and him saying that, it's, I don't know, it's not feeling good. And this is not when it's new, it's a few years later. So I asked him, gala saaf kiya kya? He said, what do you mean? Like, nahi, gala saaf kiya kya? Every time you have a itch in your throat or something, you're just feeling a little stuffy, you just... I believe that even the vehicles need that. Every now and then, if you've just been using them carefully, right, you need to rev them up. You need to give them, let them feel what they are actually designed and engineered to do. And I think just from a physical standpoint, it clears up stuff. Like, if the injectors are a little clogged, the high pressure run will clean stuff out.
Oh,
If there's a little bit of carbon deposits happening somewhere, that will also get, it'll all get kind of cleaned up.
My father still doesn't know why a Maruti 800 would run much smoother if I had just driven it versus if he had driven it continuously.
Are you serious?
Yeah. He would come back and say, did something to the car? No, I didn't. It's very smooth today. I said, yeah, I know. Then he drive it for a week, 10 days, not let me drive it. Then I drive it for 1 day. Again, the car is very smooth. It works.
It was a happy car. It felt its purpose.
Yeah, remember, peak torque is roughly when your engine's running the smoothest and best. It's when the combustion is at its best. It's there that you want to go very often if you can, and all the systems will run well. But if you baby the car, you're constantly just off idle and crawling through, things will slowly start to clog up. And clearing those clogs can be done by service, by paying money, or you could just drive a little bit better. I'm not even saying faster, I'm just saying drive better. And driving better is not about, I know what's going on around me, it's also about managing your engine a little bit better. Right, to close off the running thing, the final part is, once you're through first service, do check your manual ones. Some of them expect you to maintain rev limits even after that for a little bit. I honestly don't think you need to. But if you'd like to be careful, not what your warranty, etc., okay, fair enough, do that. But to me, first 200, 250 kilometers, 99% of what you're going to achieve with the run-in is done. And today, no matter what vehicle you buy from whichever brand, the technology is at a place where running in cannot make a significant difference to the long-term reliability of a vehicle, positively or negatively. So the amount of effort you're putting into this, honestly, it's pure emotion. It's as emotional as him trying to vary the revs very carefully with his car and me trying to change the oil halfway through. Both of these are completely useless things. And if you don't do it, not much is going to change.
Okay, if you have your formula, we'd like to hear about it and disagree with you on that. Okay.
In the two-stroke days, there was arguments about should you put castor oil versus coconut oil versus which other oil to help the ring seat and put carbon deposits in the right place early on and then ride it a certain way and all of this drama. Thankfully, the four-strokes, none of this nonsense happens. But I remember there was a garage full of new engines, RD350s, and you could smell castor oil burning and coconut oil burning and various other oil burning. It was nauseating. But this was a thing.
It's got science behind it.
So I've come seeing all of this drama to like, just
right.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Correct. Right? And I know people who've taken brand new vehicles and gone on tour. Right? I don't know how careful you can be. And I think they sat on the highway at the same speed for a long time, etc., etc. None of them are really suffering. Could their vehicle have 3% more performance than you're experiencing? Yes, possibly. Do you have the skill to understand what this 3 performance is or have an environment where you can experience this 3% difference on a regular basis? I don't think so. Anything else you'd like to say about running in, Kartik?
No, I think the basic thing, smaller, less expensive vehicles, give them more care, more expensive, more powerful machines. You have less to worry about.
Yeah, remember that more expensive means the systems are designed for more strain. You might need to be more careful with those systems because it is possible to put the strain too early. That's it. That's all it is.
That's about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we could have wrapped it up in 5 minutes, but
But hey, what's the point of having Disconnect Season 2, Episode 1, and in 5 minutes saying, hey, running and just do whatever you want? There's no point in that.
and we kept them waiting for how many months has it been now since season 1 ended?
We are almost a year exactly from the first episode of the first season.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, and recording terms and release terms, it might be a month here and there, but yeah, we're almost a year down the
Oh,
line.
wow.
Yeah.
And I hope you enjoyed it.
I hope you enjoyed it too. The next episode, I think we're going to talk about the Japanese problem.
Oh, the East.
The problem son.
Problem son. Okay, fine. So I hope that hasn't confused you further. Thank you so much for watching. This was the first episode of ThisConnect Season 2. And you know what's coming up next?
I'm confused as to how you think we've confused them. We basically said drive normally and be in traffic for the first 200 kilometers. That's it.
Yeah, just be nice. Like, oh yeah, just be nice.
Yeah. It's like motoring. Just be nice.
Yeah.
Come back soon. We'll have a new episode for you. Thank you so much for watching.